Hello, everyone. My name is Shannon Jolly, and welcome to my discussion corner. I will be speaking on the article entitled Gender Differences in Creativity, which is authored by John Bayer and James Kaufman. It was published in the Journal of Creative Behavior in 2008. The purpose of this article was to examine the innate gender differences in creativity. It kind of touches on the ideas of scores on creativity tests, creative achievement, and how there is a significant difference in achievement between male and female, or men and women. And then it kind of talks about specific developmental periods. So basically showing how creativity tends to change and how you measure creativity for children, and as they become adults, how that changes and how we are where we are now, where there is such a difference in the creative achievement. And then lastly, the article proposes a new theoretical framework, which is entitled the APT model of creativity. And it is a domain-specific model, and it's just supposed to better help us understand gender differences when it comes to creativity. I thought this article was pretty interesting because I think generally we've all seen like the stats that say, girls or women are more creative than men or boys. And this article, makes it a point to show the reader that as many articles say that, there are research that also prove the opposite, that boys are more creative than females. So essentially the article wanted to hinge more on the environmental factors or external factors that manipulate or influence creativity. So some of the developmental theories. As far as children, Singer and Rumo did an experiment, and they found that young boys, they did an experiment on young children in general, but they found specifically that young boys who scored high on divergent thinking tests, I know that's kind of a term that we've been talking about throughout the semester, but boys who scored high on these type of tests were rated as more playful, open, and curious, whereas the girls who scored high on the tests were more closed off, and they kind of labeled them as introverts and things of that nature. So I thought that was an interesting point from an early on age. And from there, they kind of came to the conclusion that the way that young children explore novel toys is correlated with their divergent thinking and creativity. So the more that children were exploring toys, at least for boys. So what they saw for girls is that it was actually the opposite. The more that young boys explored their toys, had a correlation with how well they were at divergent thinking. And so further on, the research also explored that there was negative divergent thinking test scores for boys who did not explore the toys in the same way as the others. And interesting enough, it said that young girls who are linguistically or socially competent tend to engage more in symbolic play than young boys. So that kind of goes back to the whole idea of how do you measure creativity. And they were just saying how the way that young girls think, if they're more socially competent, it looks different as far as testing goes. And so moving on into adulthood and how creativity changes, research kind of shows that girls do not show less creative attachment until after high school and college. So it was also interesting to see in the article too, it mentioned that for parents, if you have a girl and a boy, you tend to pick the boy over the girl. I just thought that was pretty interesting. It didn't kind of give any root to that or why we do that, but they were just saying that we subconsciously tend to pick the boy over the girl. And so the girls, being more mature, tend to be more creative in their thinking, and it just looks different. But it did say that girls show less creative attachment until after high school and college. And they kind of credit that more towards gender roles becoming more salient as you become a young adult. So, you start thinking about marriage and parenthood, and do you become a stay-at-home mom, and all of the responsibilities that come with the socially constructed norms of being a woman or being, a woman of the house. Those things that come with that kind of hammer or put a ceiling on a woman's creativity. So women tend to be more interested Also, as you age and you have other responsibilities that you place over your creativeness, per this article at least, women tend to become more interested in the creative product versus the actual end result. So that's where you kind of get the idea that men have more creative achievement, because as adults, you tend to see women fall off, and they're saying that is because of the gender roles that come with adulthood. And so at that level too, you have more of the extrinsic rewards become undermined by the intrinsic rewards. So you just, at that point, you're doing creative things because it genuinely makes you happy, but you may not be interested in publishing a paper or being a well-known author. And so that's where they're seeing women kind of lag behind in that creative achievement category. So overall, the gender differences in creativity, the article found that women and girls did tend to score higher on creativity tests than men and boys. Cultural values like the social roles, sexism, the heteronormativity are the key reasons to the lack of creative accomplishment by women. And it also kind of touched briefly on this idea of where I kind of bring in like this idea of privilege, to where the perfect or ideal person of society is a white, male, middle class, able-bodied, heterosexual male. And at that point, that is the set norm, and anything besides that is deviant. So that also plays into a role of women tending to be less creatively accomplished than men. The article also talks about a lack of resources that are necessary to achieve given domains. So for example, for a physics teacher, having enough resources to provide Arduino kits or bots to do that is less likely than just needing to provide pen and paper for a writer. And then the article also basically talks about some of the stereotypic gender appropriate behaviors in different domains. So also mentioning how different areas that need a higher level of creativity tend to be those for jobs for men historically. But just as an example, I was just saying how a PE teacher may be considered a masculine job. And then lastly, it talks about some of the different expectations and access to those general thematic areas. So the ATP model of creativity. As I mentioned earlier, it is just set to explain the different aspects of the problems that women have when achieving levels of creative productivity. So it talks about the initial requirements, which are the things that are necessary for creative production. So that would be things like intelligence or motivation and things of that nature. And what was pretty interesting is that they actually credit the initial requirements to the reasons why women lag behind men so much. And then the ATP model also kind of considers the general thematics. So those are the skills, traits, and knowledge that promote creativity. And in both of those, again, it still kind of goes back to the whole idea of the role women play, or the socially constructed role that women are supposed to play in society, and how that impacts the skills or the knowledge that they are, quote unquote, supposed to know or need to know for their roles in society. So that also limits their creative abilities. And then the ATP model of creativity also talks about the domains, which are the limited factors that promote creativity in specific areas. And so you also have your micro domains, which are your more specialized knowledge realms, saying that you have to master those in order to be a contributor. So like they mention like neuroscience and things of that nature, like being an expert before you can contribute. So it's kind of like, not only do you have to have this specialized knowledge, but then you have to look at how much more difficult that is for a woman. And then my questions for you all are, in your classroom, do you notice a difference in creativity between the girls and the boys? And if so, why do you think that is? And my second question is, the author suggests environmental factors impact the level of creativity reached by women and men as adults. Do you agree with that? Why or why not? And these are my references, and that is my corner. Thank you all.